Welcome back to episode number 3, where we're going to continue the journey. Last time we talked about personalization and customer loyalty. And this time we're going to take a deep dive into pricing strategy. And apparently there's a lot we can learn from retail in hospitality. So today I'm joined again with my great co-host, Joel, and also Mark Felix. We will introduce in a second. But over to you first, Joel, and please give a little presentation of yourself.
Thanks, Michael. I couldn't be more excited for this episode. I think we're all going to learn an awful lot. So my name's Joel. I'm the founder of Openr. And prior to founding Openr, I spent 5 years in the hospitality sector in technology, but before that, 10 years in grocery, which was really kind of my training ground when it came to all things business. And our vision at Openr is to transform product menu and price management from this kind of back office process that it is today in hospitality to a real source of boardroom advantage. And that's why I couldn't be more excited about this episode, because we have someone who I respect greatly and spent time working with at Sainsbury's, Mark Felix, joining us as our guest to tell us all about how retailers think about price and think about price strategy and how that drives real value for customers and for owners and for operators. Rather than doing a pretty bad job of introducing him, Mark, it's great to have you on the podcast. Would love you to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your journey, and what you're doing.
Perfect. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here as well. So a bit of background on me. So latterly, I was the Chief Commercial Officer at the AA, responsible for roadside in terms of pricing and value and the entire end-to-end experience. But the most formative part of my career was probably earlier on, where I spent, I think, nearly 8 years at Sainsbury's. Latterly running pricing, promotions, and all the marketing analytics. So for the 60,000 products we sell at Sainsbury's, actually, how do you set the price, the promotional strategy, and make sure you're driving the best return, depending on what you want to do in terms of value and volume. After that, I did a stint in online, where I worked very closely with you, Joel, at Sainsbury's, and then became the online director at John Lewis, and then spent some time also as one of the exec general managers at Money Supermarket. I think all of those roles has a lot of focus on pricing and value, be it the price of chicken or the price of toothpaste, or when you want to buy a new sofa, or making sure you get the best deal on electronics, or actually at Money Supermarket, helping households save money. So reducing the amount they have to spend on probably less interesting products like car insurance and home insurance, so that they have more money in the bank to eat out, go on holiday, or buy those grocery essentials.
And Mark, before we dive into the questions around what is pricing strategy and why it is so important and why in retail you specifically master the skill, I actually wanted maybe Joel, could you just give a little presentation of why pricing in strategy is so interesting in a context of hospitality and why we're actually diving into this today in depth?
Yeah, I was always fascinated when I joined the hospitality sector to kind of understand the differences between what I'd kind of learned at the University of Sainsbury's and then what I saw in the boardrooms of hospitality. And one of the things that stood out most prominently, and I guess kind of lived with me and then formed the foundation of the vision for Openr, was how hospitality businesses approaches price strategy relative to how a retailer like Sainsbury's approaches price strategy. And I saw the level of thought and scientific thinking and sophistication that went into a deep understanding of customer dynamics, of market dynamics, and some really kind of cutting edge technology at its time, scraping pricing from across competitor sets and having that kind of at your fingertips. I remember when I started at Sainsbury's, and this is back in kind of 2009, just having that data at my fingertips. And yet, hospitality is still in a place where many customers we speak to want that data at their fingertips, and it's now 2025, nearly 2026. So it struck me that there was quite an exciting opportunity for hospitality to learn from what retail has kind of gone before and done. And it's not an exact kind of one parallel, it never is, but take inspiration from the road that has been traveled, for want of a better phrase. And in doing so, give operators just a much more sophisticated tool set to grow revenue. And I think I'm really excited about this conversation because there's never been a more important time for hospitality to grasp the opportunity of pricing strategy and thinking scientifically about pricing. As a sector, we are facing a number of economic headwinds, whether it's the rising labor costs, rising energy costs, food costs. And we're speaking to operators across the spectrum that are increasingly saying to us, our old approach to pricing isn't working anymore. We've had to take so much price to cover the increased cost base over the last few years. The approach of just putting 3% on everything, or just putting 2.5% on mains and 1% on drinks, isn't working anymore. The approach of having one price across 70 locations in the country isn't working anymore. And so I'm excited as we start to think in a more sophisticated way about the opportunity to learn from others that have already thought in a more sophisticated way around price.
Great. That was a great segue, Joel. So Mark, what is actually great pricing strategy? If you should put a couple of words on the concept pricing strategy and how you should think about it as a senior leader in any business.
So I think a great pricing strategy, I think sort of as Joel said, pricing is a key lever to drive performance. And you have to find what that performance is. Is it about value, i.e. revenue margin, or is it about perception? So to answer your question, a great pricing strategy is a strategy that delivers what you want it to do. Now, it could be, as I said, bringing in more money, more cash in the till. Or it could actually be changing the perception of your business, that you were seen as a very expensive business that was only there for a treat or a special occasion, and actually you offer more value, which means people come to you more often. Or it could be actually you want to be known as the cheapest in the market and you will never be beaten on price, and then your service credentials or your quality credentials then play a part in. So it's not as simple as saying price has to be the highest, the lowest. Price is one lever alongside service and experience and et cetera, that helps you fulfill the promise that you want to make to your customers.
And if you could give a couple example, Mark, of that, how that played out, for example, from your retail experience, where there's many crossovers into how you operate as a restaurant chain.
Yeah. So I think, so if you take pricing of major supermarkets, just as an example, you have a variety of products. In most supermarkets, you have 50 to 60,000 products, but a customer will shop generally, if they're doing a main shop, so for their whole week, let's say they're a family of 4, they'll probably buy anything between 60 and 120 products. It varies into different people. And there are some products they buy week in, week out, that they know the price of. It's really important for them. Bread, milk, cheese, eggs, for example. There'll be some products that they top up with when they start to run low, sort of washing products or other household products. And there'll be other things that they'll buy on various times, depending on mood, appetite, etc., etc. So one of the key things we did was identify what we call core lines, KVIs, key value items, that said actually these products really are a bellwether of how you feel about the price of the supermarket in total. So if milk, for example, is significantly more expensive than your competitors, our research indicated the customer said, well, given milk is more expensive, I'm expecting everything else to be more expensive. Same potentially with branded soft drinks and various other bits. And so grocers tend to be, it's really important that we are as competitive as we want to be on that. Whereas other items that are a bit more discretionary, potentially a bit more luxury, I'm thinking premium sauces, potentially dips, etc. Actually, customers are willing to say, I'm going to pay a bit more for quality, for the quality that I get. So I guess my question almost back is, if you're in the hospitality, what is it the customers go, well, that's what I'm willing to pay more for because that is a brilliant dish and I can only get it at so-and-so, or actually this is a more commoditized product that actually I'm expecting it to be the same price as I expect or know at one of your competitors.
What is some of the key learnings you've had, like being on this journey, first with Sainsbury's, then with John Lewis, and then AA, which is in principle different businesses and sell different experiences and brand? What is like some of the key learnings you take from that journey that actually are very interesting if you're from other sectors you can learn from, in your view?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of things. So if you think about Sainsbury's was a retail grocery environment that you go into every single week, at least probably once. You touch either physically or digitally. Most people do their food shops every single week. I was then at John Lewis, which is a premium department store where customers don't attend very often. And I ran online, but they still don't visit johnlewis.com as often as they would visit a grocer. And then the AA, which we'll come to, is a slightly different product because in essence, it's a product for your moments of need, and you don't always know when you have the moment of need. So grocers, incredibly price competitive and has to be about contextual price elasticity. What is the price of eggs for grocer A versus grocer B? And do I need them now? Is it a moment in time and I'm there? I need some eggs because I need to go home and make an omelette. Terrible example. But it's about being very competitive right there, right now, and what the read across is on frequency. Slightly further along is somewhere like John Lewis, where they have to be strong on price, and actually their price guarantee says we will be the strongest, but there's more to consider. There is if I have a problem with this product, can I bring it back easily? Am I getting great information, advice and guidance? And yes, how quickly do I need the product? But the average journey time for customers from buying a sofa, from first thinking about it to purchasing it, is 12 weeks. So it's not about, we have this red sofa at the exact right price for you today. It's a slightly longer, more considered journey. And then you get to financial services, which is a less direct product, less potentially about moment in time and need. It's partly about your choice and attitude. Do I want to buy option insurance like home insurance or gadget cover? Am I of the mindset that I want to be covered for my mobile phone in case of loss? Or do I actually think, you know what, if I lose it, it's a bit annoying, but I'll pay myself? And breakdown, there's an element of choice and there's an element of various other needs in terms of your risk appetite, as in how much you want to be covered. So, and I think going back to what you said, what you have to do is work out your industry, what's important for you, and then start to build tests and hypotheses to say, right, well, what is going to work? And I can tell you now, for every test, you think you know the answer before you do it, but invariably you get different answers. Customers don't behave as you think they would.
And I was thinking, and maybe Joel can add on that, I was thinking also the importance of knowing your exact value proposition. What's really that makes people come, and if it's a restaurant, come and eat this dish with you, or a hotel, why is people really book with you compared to others? What is like really that thing? It has to be crystal clear before you can really develop a pricing strategy that really has an impact on performance.
Yeah, I think that's right, Michael. And this is where it's super interesting, and where taking a more scientific approach to this whole area can bear significant amounts of fruit. So it's fascinating kind of hearing Mark, and I remember this from my time at Sainsbury, was talking about KVIs and the kind of key value indicators. That came from deep customer insight that validated the hypothesis that this set of products were materially important to a customer's perception of value within the grocery section. So there was a hypothesis about that. That was then researched, tested, validated, and a pricing strategy kind of built off the back of it. So even that kind of view of what your value proposition is and how customers define value needs to start off as a hypothesis to be refuted or confirmed through experimentation. And it's really interesting in hospitality, because you can start thinking KVI. Okay, so what are my kind of key value indicators as a restaurant? And I actually think it's quite a different context, because you might argue that I don't know, if you're Pizza Express, your key value indicator is your margarita. If you're Wagamama's, your KVI is your katsu curry. If you are Nando's, it's a half chicken and chips. Whereas actually there's an alternative hypothesis, which is, well, that's actually the hero product, and the reason that people come into your large percentage of your customers come into your restaurant in the first place. And historically, I think within the sector, we've been nervous about kind of price optimizing those kind of hero products, because we almost think they're key value indicators. Whereas actually there's an alternative hypothesis, which is that's the reason customers are coming into the restaurant in the first place. Therefore, there's probably some more price elasticity with that product, and you might get much better benefit from a smaller price increase of that kind of core hero product and keeping prices low for some of the attachment products around it, to drive drinks participation, to drive dessert participation. That actually drives a better overall spend per head, or as we would call it in the retail world, the basket spend. And all of that is just hypotheses. All of that is me just mouthing off about, well, it could be this, it could be that. I think the key difference for me between retail and hospitality is the platforms that retail has and the approach to testing some of those hypotheses, and the scientific approach to measuring the effectiveness of pricing strategy, and how persistent that has been, and how deep that foundation is now, having been first put in place decades ago. Mark, I wonder if you'd be able to tell us a little bit about kind of just some of the nuts and bolts of how this type of thing works in a retailer, and how the thinking is led, but also the tools that a retailer has to.
Right. So it's interesting, because I think the restaurant segment has just as many options for testing, I suspect, given the number of customers coming through, and also the types of people who, is it one person, two person, family, special occasion, etc. But in terms of the testing, so grocers will have 60,000 products, and they are able to scrape each other's websites to get their prices, which means that actually you can have a really clear understanding of your price against your competitors. Now, there's got to be some element of matching. So a own brand chicken, 1 kilo, you say, well, actually ours is supermarket A is corn-fed, supermarket B isn't corn-fed, indoor, outdoor raised. But actually that's quite easy to do. And what they will all do is run tests on a regular basis to really understand price elasticity. I mean, without stating the obvious, price elasticity is if you raise a product or lower, if you raise the price of product or lower the price of product, how many more or less customers buy it? And do they then continue to buy it or not? It's about the sensitivity of the customer when a price goes up and the price goes down. So we would run tests on a regular basis to say, actually, let's increase the price of this either in absolute against your competitors. So raise the price of chicken by 50 pence against a competitor and see what happens, or also raise the difference between an own brand, which is always cheaper, versus a branded product, and see whether customers trade up or trade down. Because when you're in the shop, both a physical shop or a digital shop, and you are choosing a product, you invariably choose a brand versus an own brand. For most branded products, there's an own brand equivalent. So you're not only thinking, am I happy paying the price against a competitor? Do I need to buy it now? Yes, no. But also, do I want to buy the brand, and does the brand live up to the promise? Or am I happy with the own brand, which is the promise of the retailer? Sainsbury's own brand, which Joel and I obviously think is amazing, is Sainsbury's quality. And then you have to decide, am I going to buy the own brand and the quality, let's take crisps, versus buying Walker's crisps? And does the Walker's brand mean a lot more? And I think the key thing is build some hypotheses and go and test them. And I guarantee you run 10 tests, 3 will be successful, 3 will not be successful, and 3 or 4 will make no difference. i.e. 3 shows a difference, 3 shows a negative difference, and another 4 is inconclusive. The point for that is, number 1, no one has all the right answers, but number 2, just start and go and test. Because once you start to test, you'll learn more, and then you can drive a lot more value.
And Mark, how do you frame your test in the experience from, let's say, Sainsbury? Do you go and do that in 10 sites? What was the approach to, in a way, to validate if it's working or not working?
So grocery means you have to have the same price on a nationalized basis. So we would have to charge the same price for Coca-Cola across every shop of the same format. Generally in grocers, you have large shops and you have small shops also, main stores and convenience. So you couldn't test in a region. You couldn't say we're going to raise the price of Coke in Wales versus the rest of the country. That's not allowed. But what you did was you decided when you wanted to run tests by increasing, lowering or raising prices, and generally ran them for 4 to 6 weeks. If you're in an industry where you don't have to be nationalized pricing, I think that's really interesting. And I would start to look at both clusters in terms of where your locations are, city centers versus out of town. I'd also start to look geographically as well. And then another vector potentially is time of day. If I'm wanting to get more customers in the less busy periods, actually, can you have lower pricing? I think the one thing you have to do with any testing is almost what I call is the the arm test. My mother's always proud of anything I do, no matter how badly I do it. But if you're doing a test and you had to explain it to someone, would they say that's fair? So I wouldn't say, when it rains, when it's cold, raise the price of coffee by 200%. Not sure actually you would feel that's the right thing to do, but actually tests where you're testing different times a day, potentially where you're lowering pricings to see if you can get more volume uplift, I think is very interesting.
Joel, have you seen anyone, because I guess you talk pricing strategy a lot with your customers with the Openr platform, have you seen anyone having this approach in hospitality where they go in and really do test and learn projects on their pricing?
There are a few. I think the sector is starting to think about the possibility, I think driven by necessity, as I kind of touched on at the top of this podcast. What I would say is I've not yet seen anyone that has, I would say, a culture of continuous experimentation. And I think that is in large part driven by constraints of technology. So in order to run the volume of experiments that Mark has spoken about, the frequency that Mark has shared, you ultimately need a platform or set of platforms and set of technologies that enable you to change that proposition, whether it's the menu, the pricing, rapidly, and at scale. So typically, we find operators and execs that are increasingly interested and open to a lot of the things that Mark's just spoken about, whether that's a more sophisticated geographic approach. It could be moving from one national price band to 3 regional price bands. It could be moving from 3 to 15 price bands. For others, it can be around kind of optimizing a proposition for late night, which is a very different kind of customer type with increased security cost, etc. For others, it's around optimizing for things like summer holidays, making sure that you've got a proposition that really kind of resonates and that is real value for money, whether that's a high, tourist footfall area or high kind of domestic school holiday crowd. So we'll often, once we kind of scratch beneath the surface, find that there's actually amongst marketers and finance leaders and operators quite a lot of ideas that they have, but they struggle to see how they can almost then put that into practice. And hence that's partly the vision behind kind of what we do, and we want to help operators with tools that help them measure the effectiveness of those hypotheses. So I think the one reality that we have to acknowledge in this conversation is that retail typically has much larger central teams than hospitality. Retail spends a much higher percentage of their overall revenue on technology than hospitality does. So tech in the hospitality sector needs to work harder. And therefore, we're trying to provide almost kind of data science for non-data scientists, which kind of help people to measure and understand the results of those experiments, as well as being able to execute them.
And you also talked about something interesting, Mark. You talked about your, old label product and then, more branded products. And I actually don't know, maybe Joel could have an input on that, but I'm in hospitality. Often you have you have a core product. Yeah. You don't trade, you maybe drinks, you have some products that's not yours, where you can maybe do some own labeling and so on. I see some make their own beers and so on, but what is the key learnings if you want to go down that route and think, oh, that's an interesting thing, we can do some own branded products where we can actually charge a different pricing on than we do on branded products in our, let's just keep it in the drink section, because I think that's probably the easiest one to unlock in hospitality if Joel don't have a different view.
Yeah, that'd be great to get Mark's view on that. I mean, you can do this across different sections of the menu as well, though. So one of the things that the Azuri group did whilst I was there was introduce a fresh pasta section into their pasta section, and actually, without taking any price on the core dishes, grew spend per head because people traded up into a premium pasta dish, because there's a quality perception with fresh pasta that effectively meant customers were willing to pay more for a fresh pasta dish than they were for a pasta dish that was cooked using dried pasta. Similar kind of technique against the kind of laddering of good, better, best within a category, and then giving customers choice and the option to kind of buy into different tiers of quality. Something that the retailers, kind of led by Tesco, actually I think it was in the kind of late 80s, early 90s or mid 90s, kind of introduced that kind of value, standard and premium tiering within each of the kind of own brand sections. So drinks is a good one, though. So it'd be interesting to get kind of Mark's view. One area that crosses over is obviously beer and wine, and I wonder if it's interesting just to think about kind of how retailers think about price strategy when it comes to something like wine and the lessons that hospitality could learn from that.
It's interesting. I mean, the alcohol pricing strategy has been hampered by the minimum alcohol pricing legislation that came in quite some time ago. But I think there's something about, I think actually the classic one, wine, customers have a price point in their head for a bottle of wine. And I remember if you lowered prices to around that price point, this is for certain customers, not everyone, you would see an uplift. So wine is certainly very price point driven for a segment of customers. I think going back to Joel, your point about tiering, as a father with kids that only want pasta when they go to restaurants, I would much rather pay more for homemade pasta than potentially, it's freeze dried or exactly what it's called, but sort of standard pasta. So I think there's an interesting one there. But the thing about tiering is you never know quite what the answer is. I remember the tiering for chicken, or pasta sauce, own brand versus brand, was a lot wider. Sorry, it was a lot narrower. Customers would be willing to pay an extra 10 pence for a branded one than toothpaste, where in essence, own brand toothpaste, actually customers were slightly wary of the pricing of it because they thought, well, if I'm only paying 50 pence for toothpaste, is it going to burn my teeth? It's actually probably exactly the same. And I think the thing is, you don't know the answer until you run a test. We had this phrase, not at Sainsbury's, but one-way doors versus two-way doors. So one-way door is a door you can only go through one way. And therefore, in business, if you have that, you have to be really certain when you're making a decision because you can't come back. A two-way door, we called, is that you can go there and you come back. Very simple thing is every test at Sainsbury's, we knew what the worst possible outcome was. And therefore, actually, there wasn't a real downside for testing because as long as you were aware that, your revenue might go up or down by X%, your value may go up or down, you didn't have much to lose. And that's what I would argue in hospitality industry. If you set the tests up in a way that you know how long they're going to last for and what the maximum exposure is, you will only learn and you will probably only gain value. Maybe not from that test, but you might learn actually that putting £1 on fresh pasta probably isn't enough. And maybe people think, well, actually, it's only £1 more, probably not really fresh, or maybe they say it's fresh, but it's left over. And it's not my industry, so I don't know. So maybe actually it's £2 or making it, as they say, reassuringly expensive.
And I guess when you do all these tests, Mark, there's also a specific way you captured all these learnings. So you actually make sure that, Joel talked about a culture. Yeah? How do you create a culture exactly by, either sharing the learning and people can really see this insight really drives the difference in business. What is like a recommended way of capturing these learning as you do it and make sure it gets to the right stakeholders? Because I think one thing is to do the test and see the result, but how do you actually then use it actively going forward? Because I guess when you get test right in one area, there will be some short gains other places as well.
Yeah. So I think there's sort of two main principles. Number one, get the data. So raise lower prices, understand how many sales went up and went down, but also look at other factors such as availability. So if you suddenly did a very steep price drop and you didn't see sales correspondingly go up as much, well, actually, was there enough stock? I remember doing tests on nappies, and when you run out of nappies, you run out of nappies. And actually, nappies is one key item that are very brand sensitive. So some customers love the brand, some customers love the own brand, and they would very rarely switch between if they have kids, because if you've got something that works with a young child, just why change it, especially given the challenge with nappies and what happens if it doesn't work. So number one, sort of get the right data, and it's not just the sales data, it's the availability data, it's the returns, it's the substitution. The other one is sort of go and speak to the people closest to it. So when we did some price testing, I'd go down to my local stores and we called around other branches saying, any reactions on this, that, and the other. So I guess from the hospitality industry, it's not only sales, but it's then speaking to the staff, etc., saying, well, have you seen any change? Because that's just as rich a source of data as looking at the numbers, is what are customers thinking, feeling, and saying.
So you almost need to create this process of how you're going to capture this data every
Yeah.
time and make sure that process is run, and you then get that insight presented on to the team to make, so the group of people to make the decision on price. Who then ultimately make the decision in a grocers? Is that a one person job, or is it a committee? How is it actually structured?
It's a collaborative effort. So the buyers would be in charge of revenue and margin. So they are the ultimate ones accountable. And then the pricing team had a set of guardrails which they could and couldn't go beyond. Because if you're a buyer of a product, I don't know, I'm trying to think of it. Milk was obviously a very iconic pricing, but if you are a buyer of a lesser known product, there is a chance that you raise that price too high, it becomes offensive pricing. Now, as a buyer, people are still buying it from you because they're there and they're not too bothered, but they go, oh, you know what, actually, I don't have a great feeling because just paying £2 more for buying this product, does that mean that everything else around the shop is £2 more expensive? So you have to have the sense of collaboration, which is the pricing team could ultimately say yes or no, but we never wanted to get to a state where we said, no, I'm going to block you from doing that price, because we all had the ultimate aim, which was to drive greater value for the customers, and the customers then reward us by visiting us more often, which means they spend more of their weekly food shop with us rather than a competitor, and therefore the performance went up. So I guess it's who is really concerned, motivated, incentivized by restaurants, pubs, etc., delivering against their key targets. And again, those targets could be bring as much money in till as possible. It could be actually customers pick you first. And when it's a special occasion, they say, I want to go to here over there. And therefore they come back more often, maybe don't spend as much each time, but they reward you with their repeat business.
I think the other thing that was being introduced whilst I was buying at Sainsbury's was the additional richness of customer data. So layered on top of that kind of pricing guardrail and your margin and revenue targets that you had to hit, you could start to see through Nectar, Tesco does through Clubcard, exactly who was buying your products. And most importantly for me, anyway, I remember, was their relative loyalty to that particular product. So you started to have this really three-dimensional view, which was, well, actually, if I sit here in the cold light of day and look at my category of 2,000 SKUs that I'm ultimately managing, there's these three here that are relatively low volume and are actually not performing particularly well from a kind of margin per square inch on the shelf edge, or units per branch per week, as we used to say. But when you got the customer data, you started to realize, well, actually, but the customers who buy that product are disproportionately loyal to that product. They won't buy anything else in the category, and therefore you are. I remember when I had the privilege of working for Justin when he was CEO. We used to get so many letters from customers that were about this one particular product that had gone, delisted or gone up in price like significantly overnight, and it was a disproportionately, to Mark's point, important product to them, and it drove an emotional response to their entire experience with the brand, and it was just a box of Basics cornflakes.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
And you might think it's just a box of Basics cornflakes, but when you understand who the consumer is that is buying it and how loyal they are to that, you start to understand its role in the overall architecture. And I think it's very similar for hospitality. There might be products on your menu that may be lower volume and might be a candidate for innovation, removal, renewal, etc. If you can start to understand, well, actually, who is buying that product and how often they buy that product when they come and visit you, you can start to understand its role in driving loyalty to your overall brand and make better decisions. And as loyalty is finally starting to hit hospitality now, it seems every restaurant group and QSR is now investing in loyalty programs. This is the promise, is that you can now start to also understand your different customer segment types and map them to the range that you have and understand the interaction between those two things.
Yeah, and I guess also your customer loyalty fan or fan group can also change over time. If you've been in business for a long time, your business in transition, your customer might change as well over time, and what they value as well as they go through their life cycle of things happening in them. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I think one thing we should be really cognizant of is there is a cost to all of this. Hey, there is a cost to running pricing experiments. There's management, effort, technology, investment, discretion, to an extent, some kind of disruption if you're changing your prices more frequently. So if you're a typical hospitality business today, I change up my prices twice per year. You're not going to learn enough by just doing that twice per year. And sure, there's people like us that give you technology to kind of change that pricing more frequently and learn. But Mark, I wonder if you could, if you were sitting in a boardroom and there's concern from a CFO or a CEO around, almost the cost of that experimentation, what would you say to convince them that it's worth it in terms of the upside and the benefit?
I think, I can't imagine how hard it is to be in the hospitality industry at the moment, and I've never worked there, and I just look at it and think this must be hard. But if you're changing your prices twice a year, and you suddenly change them 3 times a year, you've got a 30% increase in data and testing capacity. And even if a third of those work, you've got a 10% improvement. So I would say actually just the small steps, one after the other, the small tests, I would bet a lot of money that will drive incremental value. I would drive incremental value, number one, because you're learning more about your customers. And number two, because you're gaining a competitive advantage over your competitors who aren't doing it. So you're working on something that they aren't, and you're doing more. Grocers have large pricing teams now, but they were a lot smaller. When I joined Sainsbury's, the pricing team was sort of 7 or 8 people. When I left that team, we were 20, 25. And as you remember, the CFO at Sainsbury's doesn't allow heads to grow unless there's a good ROI. And we were driving more value for the business. The AA has a huge, AA and financial services has a huge amount of pricing sophistication, and even John Lewis continued to increase it. So I think there's a lot that retailers can learn from hospitality, and I think they're doing a lot more about in-store theatre and making shops an exciting place to be, and creating a warm and fuzzy feeling that they have to do as they battle online. But I would say the hospitality industry is grocers and retailers and others have been investing in pricing capability at incremental amounts for multiple years. And the first step is probably the hardest, but I would very much argue there's very little to lose by having more data about your competitors and about how you stack up against them, and be able to learn more data about your own customers. Go to any of your restaurants, and I'm sure if you go and ask the manager, tell me about your types of customers, tell me what the most popular thing is on the menu, time of day, tell me what they complain about the most. They'll know it's the pasta dish, it's this, it's that, and the other. You're giving them the ability to have more data about their customers to prove and test hypotheses, and I'm very certain it will only add a huge amount of value.
That is very interesting what you said there, because often I get the feel in any business I'm connected with, you actually want to go and ask the customer first what's not working, but actually you can go and ask your front line. Yeah. And they'll give you much more honest and precise information. And of course you need to be, have some, rational thoughts about the info you get, but actually that first step of going and doing that and actually structuring that insight be hugely beneficial for any hospitality business. I don't even agree, Joel, where actually you can start creating the 20% that give 80% in your future testing. Where should we actually go and invest? What should we actually do different when it comes to the value we want to sell to our key customers?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the key for me is, I love the way that Mark framed that, which is if you're changing your prices twice a year, and you just moved to change it 3 times a year, which you might say is a very baby step, it's 30% more learning.
Yeah, love that as well.
And in a world where customer behavior is probably more uncertain than ever, and it's more competitive than ever, and there's fewer pounds in customers' pockets, it is going to be those operators that can learn more and can learn faster about their customers and about the changing dynamic of value perception in 21st century business that are going to win.
And as we talk about the future, Mark, it would be great here as one of the last things to hear your thoughts about, like, how would pricing strategy evolve? What is the innovation? What do we need to be aware of? And, what role does AI technology play in all this as well? Because I could only see it becomes easier to have this insight, but you still need to have a culture to execute on it.
So others know more about AI than me. I think I can't pretend it, but I think AI will give you the ability to have more scenarios and to test them faster or drive hypotheses. So I think the way I'd love to see AI in pricing is it gives you more options to test, more variability, and more views of what the outcome will be. I don't think letting AI drive your pricing strategy is a good thing, but that's someone in the future. I think on innovations, I think there's something about being more dynamic on testing and being able to test more. I wonder if there's something about collegiate and loyalty. So in a lot of the digital retailers are talking about people like you are buying this, or this item is trending, this item is very hot. How do you start to potentially be more local about this is what's really popular in your area, potentially? And then I think loyalty in hospitality is really interesting. I've seen some great examples. I remember, I think it was your Millionaires app I really liked, and actually rewarded loyalty in various other apps as well. But I think there's a lot more to do there to say, actually, come back more often and we will reward you with it.
Yeah, I think that there's areas of AI that will, there are business areas where AI will automate, and there's areas of business where AI will augment. And I definitely think with pricing, AI is going to augment pricing strategy, not automate pricing strategy. So pricing strategy, we've spent this whole last 40 minutes talking about how crucial pricing strategy is to your brand and to your perception. It's never going to be the case, I don't think, that you will, or I wouldn't advocate for outsourcing pricing strategy to AI, but what AI can do is help augment your pricing strategy by helping you to run more experiments at greater scale, faster, learning faster. But we still think we're operating in a world, and should operate in a world, where those hypotheses might be suggested by AI, they might be suggested by executives, but they're ultimately kind of executed with human approval. AI then steps in to do the heavy lifting and help push the data out to the various platforms, measure the impact, and help you interrogate and understand the result, but not getting close to a world where ultimately AI is a black box, which is ultimately just doing all of your pricing for you. And I think if you see it like that, it becomes really exciting for hospitality, because we've already spoken. I mean, Mark's the pricing team at Sainsbury started with 7 or 8 people, is now at 25. I mean, most hospitality businesses could dream of having a pricing team of 7 people. It's probably 1, 2, or 3 max, even in the large groups. And so for me, the real promise of AI is helping that team become much more productive and much more efficient, and augmenting their capability with technology that just does lots of the heavy lifting and helps them get from hypotheses to insight so much faster than they've historically been able to. And that's what we're pushing for and what we're building, and where we think the real game-changing impact of AI is going to be in this sector.
Is there any other pricing models you think, Mark, from, maybe you don't have experience from hospitality, you would say that will be an obvious model to go and test in the future of as the world are changing for hospitality operators when it comes to pricing strategy?
I'm very sort of reticent to say test this model because I don't know enough about it, and whatever I say, I can't guarantee. I think there's something interesting about, as Joel said, about time of day, time of year, and ideally weather. I think you'll be slightly careful. It's warm weather will raise our prices, probably won't go down very well. But actually, the sun's out. It's summertime. It's a major event. Lowering prices to say, come and celebrate with us. I have 3 kids. They always like to eat out for their birthday, and I remember a few places where I took a cake along, and I did buy dessert as well. Some of them wanting to charge you for presenting a cake to you anyway. I don't know whether that's a sort of dangerous thing to talk about in hospitality. It didn't feel very collegiate and in terms of sort of loyalty, but I would just try and look at time of day, weather, but always in a positive way in terms of actually, we want you to come into us. We want to make it more special and more unique. And Joel, back to your point, yes, we had 7 at Sainsbury's, but pre your time, my time, eventually they started with 1 person. It used to be the shop manager that could do it, and then they got one person. 1 person became 2, became 4. So the hardest thing is, I haven't been to the gym for weeks, is just starting, right? Just get out there, test. What's the worst that can happen?
Great. Is there anything you wanted to ask Mark about, Joel, we didn't cover in the conversation?
Nothing. I will one day ask you about how the restaurants work, because I'm always curious to see actually how it works. I'll come and visit a kitchen one day, but no, I will leave the magic there.
I know, I am still learning. I'm still learning, Mark. So but it's been a pleasure to have you on, and I think it's just been a great example. I think if we as a sector can reach out to those beyond our walls, there's so much that we can learn from one another, and come away with some really exciting ideas and opportunities to help this sector that we love so much grow and thrive for the decades ahead.
Yeah, and I think that was spot on, Joel. And I think it really, if there's somebody that have been listening to this, they might started thinking in a new way and maybe thought, oh, I would love to hear some more about that. So where could, if people had more questions, Mark, or they thought, oh, I really want to connect with Mark, he sounds like he has some great experience I would like to touch on as well. Could they reach out to you on LinkedIn? Where's the best place to connect you?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. I share my name with a world strongman. So if you tell me to do you can get someone who doesn't look anything like me.
You sure you're not the same person, Mike?
I'm not the same person. I do sometimes get emails because I have a fairly standard email handle addressed to him. So I think LinkedIn, I can't be that hard to find. Always happy to answer questions. I run pricing as part of a broader role now, but I think pricing is one of the most fascinating jobs I've ever done. It's definitely something that I absolutely love.
Great. We'll put the link to in the show notes, and people can connect with you there. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on the show and the conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mark.